Good afternoon, JJ.
Nice to see you.
Hey, good to meet you in this place. Now, let me remind you who JJ French is. You most all know, but obviously coming from the audio market, following, I might refresh your mind. JJ is very prominent. He was the leader and the founder of a extremely popular rock band called Twisted Sister. Has a tremendous experience, obviously, in the rock. How many concerts have you covered?
I've done myself, because I'm the only original member of the band, starting in 1973. I've done over 9,000 shows.
And I think you have good records that have come
Our
out
records
at
have
the
sold
platinum.
yes, 35 million albums sold, and I have about 37 gold and platinum records from around the world, which is a resume. It's definitely a resume for sure. You know, there's definitely bands that are way, way, way bigger than us, but it's a good resume, and it's a 50-year career.
And when I think it's extraordinary about JJ that I think I have a good lunch together. We hadn't met for at least 2-3 years, I think.
Yeah, we did.
That we found that we had actually some connection in the rock industry where I came from as well, but not as a musician, but as a PR and A&R man. So it was very interesting that our lives have carried in a sort of semi-parallel way, such that we love good quality things, but not only that, that we love good audio equipment.
Yeah, and that's where we kind of cross over, because you're a music industry veteran on the side that you worked on, which is the PR side and the promotion side and so on, and I'm on the musician side. But we started out as audiophiles, whether we knew it or not. And roughly, the guys were my age, your age, around 70. The guys who've been into it got into it roughly at the same time, which is the late 60s, early 70s. We bought what was considered our first stereo systems. We were all excited, you know. And I guess if you're British, you have a British skew of that system. As an American, you know, I graduated from a Westinghouse one-piece unit that my parents bought me to finally a Sony receiver, a pair of KLH speakers, and if I remember quickly, an AR turntable. And that was like, oh my God.
You can't be bullshitted about what good music is about because you're in the first row. So what you think is makes you so still today excited about owning good audio components?
It's because I know hi-fi, I know the history of high-end, and I know how it sounds. And that may sound weird to say that, but I think you would agree with me that the art of high-end audio and understanding high-end audio is a kind of an interesting pathway, because all of the people involved in it, all the dozens of manufacturers around the world and the hundreds of people who buy it because they know what kind of high-end audio is the difference between what that is and what our parents thought it was and what our friends have no idea it is. It's an ability for a system to transport you into a different place. And it's true that more money will bring you greater joy, but it doesn't have to be insane money. Because I can tell you, you can spend you can spend a reasonable amount of money today and put great systems together, because it's all kind of filtered itself down. I tell people all the time who come to my house and hear my system and go, my God, I've never heard anything like this. I said, you know what? I know a company that sells a speaker for $800 that will blow your mind. And I know a power amplifier or integrated amp that sells for like $1,500 that will blow your mind. And I can put these systems together for them, and they go, I've never heard that. And then to go from that to to continually climb up the food chain to then get to the insane levels is crazy. But you know what? What people don't understand, I think you'll agree with me, is just because you're throwing money at something doesn't make it better. Correct? You have to know what you're doing.
Of course, but there is a justification as well. What is your thing in today's world where there's wars, there's COVID, there's all sorts of things, is to have a great audio system to reunite with at home.
I think if music is your passion, if music gives you something that is that important, that enriches your soul, then it is important. You know, I collect guitars, I buy guitars, and people say to me, how do you know the difference? And I said, well, if you've been playing for years, you know the difference. You hear the difference. It's a matter of familiarity and understanding how things are. There's so many good products out there that can deliver so much satisfaction to you. And it just depends on the kind of music you want to listen to and the kind of person who is going to help you guide you through it. But it's all a passion. It's a passion. I need to wake up in the morning when I'm listening to my system, and I need to hear a certain way, and it makes me happy.
That makes you happy, yes. And I think that's so important. I personally, I'm going to ask you maybe a tricky question. It's an old audio professional question. Do you think a good system is something that you should hear or something that you should feel?
Well, I'll put another piece in there.
Okay.
Something you should see, because the aesthetics and the sound are intertwined in ways that are almost impossible to articulate. Why do they go to such lengths to look a certain way too? Because you want the pleasure of seeing this thing. It's kind of like you want the pleasure of holding a record album and not a CD.
That's a good point.
Because you want the tactile feeling that what you have is a luxury or is a better product. So I would say that probably how you hear is the most important. But I don't know if you can separate all these things. I think they all come together. You know, Mike Kay at Lyric was my mentor.
We should mention that you worked in the audio industry as well.
Well, this is what kind of makes it interesting for us, because I'm just not a musician who is a producer and a musician. I'm an audiophile. And it's interesting, I'm an audiophile because Twisted Sister's a heavy metal band and not necessarily the kind of band that makes records that sound like, Pink Floyd. You know, we throw a couple of Marshalls in a room and we're turning it up, and the band doesn't sit there and analyze it the way some other bands do, like listening to a Dire Straits record, for example. It's a whole different experience. In fact, I'll tell you a story. Dieter Dierks, German producer from the Scorpions, produced our album, Come Out and Play. It was the first 60-track digital album ever recorded in 1985. 2 Mitsubishi 30-track machines. And the budget for these machines was insane. And I said to him, why are we spending all this money? We're recording Marshall amplifiers, which have 100% distortion. He goes, JJ, because you get the cleanest distortion you've ever heard. He goes, it'll be the cleanest distortion. Do we need a clean distortion? But the fact is that you kind of like learn to grow into it, and I think it's a combination of things. But I'm a sophisticated listener, so you're asking the wrong person here. I'm listening for things that the average person may not listen for.
Yeah, but I guess that what I was saying is that you said that you feel great. And I think that a lot of audiophiles, this is my own experience, and I don't have to say that yours is the same, listen for specific things, how clean the bass is, how sweet is the treble, how beautiful is the stage. I think that above all these specific points, there's something that you feel it or you don't feel it. Meaning, you get you have that feel-good effect, or you don't have that feel-good effect. So that's why I mentioned the point feeling.
Well, here's something to keep in mind. When I first fell in love with rock and roll, I listened to it through a 1-inch speaker on a transistor radio that cost $2.
Exactly.
Well, let's think about this: a 1-inch speaker on a Chinese or Japanese-built transistor radio that I paid $2 for, which probably cost 15 cents to manufacture. And yet the music that came out of that 1-inch speaker in that transistor radio transformed my life. So the question is, well, if that did it, what does that say to you? So what that says to me is, number one, it's the music. It's always the music. It's always the material. Without that, you got nothing. Then after that comes the layers of understanding how that stuff was done. And as a musician, of course, the more sophisticated I became, the more I wanted to learn the secrets of what went on in the studio. And the truth is, the better resolution of your system, the more you can actually hear all those things that go into it. And it just commensurately goes with the fact that if you happen just to be a listener, just a pure listener, you'll also sit back and go, wow, that sounds incredible. Because most of the people who come to my house and hear my systems, they're not sophisticated musicians. They're not sophisticated in anything. They're just people who go, I never heard Sinatra sound like that. I never heard so-and-so sound like that. Like, I'm blown away. Here's what blows me away. The fact that the engineers back in the 50s and early 60s, who did not have the high-end systems that we have today, they were so good.
Absolutely.
They were so good. They captured that stuff so that we could enjoy it many years later.
Right. Yeah. That's very important, to enjoy the music, and you just said it. But you just happen to have a very good system. You you showed it to me, and I know the system. When I saw it, when you showed me the picture, it sort of gave me a sound in my head because I've been doing this for so long, and I would say this is a very correctly musical system. So if we were to change the speakers there, would you get the same feeling?
It's a good question. The first thing you have to do in putting a system together is understanding the room you're putting it in,
Exactly.
having the right speaker for that room.
Exactly.
And people work backwards and forwards. I don't. I've been in enough places, enough rooms, and enough situations to know that the room dictates what the system is going to be, and the size of the room dictates the kind of speaker that can fit in the room. And you don't have to spend $1 billion, and just because you have $1 billion, you don't put a 7-foot speaker in a room that's 6 by 11. You just don't. You can
Well,
put
we have a
speaker.
journalist friend that defeats the laws.
Okay. But you know as well as I do that is the truth.
Yeah.
So in my room, my current speakers are by far the lowest level of this particular brand, which by the way ain't cheap. But this brand goes.
It's not the lowest, by the way. There's one below.
Well, maybe one below. But the point is the rest of the equipment could easily push much more sophisticated, much more expensive speakers, and yet they don't, because that speaker works in that room perfectly, and then everything else behind it works. I'll tell you something interesting. I went from a 250 watt amplifier down to a 30 watt amplifier of the same manufacturer, but it went from Class AB to Class A, down to a 30 watt Class A, and it sounds better in those speakers than the 250 watt amplifier does. So again, why do I do this? Why can't I do it? Well, because I've been around the business long enough to know. These companies know me. I get a chance to
and the perfect matching of components.
Perfect matching components. So my components are matched perfectly to my room, and that's why the room sounds good.
And then matched to the system. But eventually, I get the feeling that when you get up every morning, you don't say how good the bass is how good it feels. That's what I was trying to get at.
Yeah.
Because you're not there and I've just heard this note. I don't know. Dire Straits is an audiophile classic. Oh, have you heard that? No. It's how the feeling throughout the day is. How much you listen a day, by the way?
Well, okay, so to that end, I have a Sonos system. So just about everybody I know seems to have one, because it's just an easy system.
Yeah,
it's
of course.
Inexpensive. It's easy. It's 2 buttons you push and you get music. And that's always on in the house. It's always in background music. In my office, in my studio, my system, I usually put it on about a couple of hours a day. And it just depends on when I have free time, because the way my desk is situated is not in the center of the speaker. So that means I have to leave my desk. I have to sit down on my couch. And we all talk about sweet spots in systems. We all know you spend all this money for 30 inches of space. I mean, that's kind of like what you're doing. It's like, is that the perfect 30 inches of space? So my system is tailored to work really well in that. And so when I need that enrichment, it's great. And by the way, that enrichment comes from all different kinds of music. The first concert I ever attended, which, as it turns out, is an audiophile classic concert, was the Weavers at Carnegie Hall in 1963. I was at that show. I was at 9 years old. I was 9 years old, and a great recording, phenomenal recording.
On Vanguard, was that?
Yes, it was on Vanguard. So I have that recording, and when I put that on, or I put on Peter, Paul, and Mary live at Carnegie Hall, or I put on Harry Belafonte live at Carnegie Hall, or if I listen to I Dream of Dean by Dean Martin, I listen to stuff going back like 50, 60 years that were recorded by great engineers who knew what the hell they were doing. Their ability to capture the instruments is so damn great. It's crazy. You just sit there and go, those guys really knew what the hell they were doing. It sounds positive. So it's very enriching for me to get my opportunity to do it. And by the way, I just don't play audiophile music on my audiophile system.
Well, that's a very important point. We can say to you audiophiles, get rid of all this audiophile. Just start enjoying your memory music and your today's music. But this board, I don't know.
Well, no, you can if you want. It's there to enjoy.
I have been for many years, and I spoke to one of the journalists that's caught in a modern controversy, and we're not going to mention his name because I think there's a huge case going in the States about this. But that if you have how you experienced from Jimi Hendrix, and that you have enjoyed it at the time, there's no way that an audiophile recording is going to push those boundaries and say it's better. Because no, it's not better, because your experience of it is based on a memory, and that memory, the beauty of owning a great system is that you can bring those memories back as faithfully as possible. And so the beauty, I think, of music is trying to stay genuine, to stay original. And I'm this is my opinion. I'm not asking you a question now. Is that stay away from all
The hype that goes with
the
all that
hype?
stuff.
Yeah.
Well, I'll tell you an interesting thing about that. The first time I realized that records could sound different, forget the super records that exist now, but going back to the
Let's not
60s,
talk about
I remember I had a copy of a Moody Blues album. And
Nights and White Saturday.
no, with a later version of it. Doesn't matter.
Yeah,
The point is,
yeah.
I had a Moody Blues record and I scratched it, so I had to buy a new one. And I just went to the store and bought the same for $3.99, same album, and it sounded way better than the one that I had. And I said to myself, why does this copy sound better
Already
than this
then,
copy?
wow.
And so I asked somebody, and they said, well, that's because they stamped 5,000 records off a stamper, and maybe the one you just bought is an earlier one from the stamper, maybe the older one
That's
was
a
like
good
towards
point, of course.
5,000. So it's not going to sound as good as the other one. That's the first time I realized that even mattered. Okay? So I started getting really fascinated by the fact. So to that point, Sgt. Pepper has come out. It's been remixed. I've got 8,000 versions of Sgt. Pepper, right? I mean, 8,000 of them. I've got them. I've got British stuff from '67. I've got crazy versions of Sgt. Pepper because I'm a Beatle fanatic and a Beatle writer. A woman in my apartment building recently had lost her apartment, and the super was cleaning out her apartment. He calls me up. He goes, "Hey, I got a copy of Sgt. Pepper that's been sitting in her living room since 1967, right?" So he goes, "You want it? I'm gonna throw it in the garbage." So he gives me the copy, and the cover's all like torn. There's tape on the cover. I take out this regular Capitol recording from 1967. I put it on my record player, my turntable, and it was the best sounding Sgt. Pepper I ever heard. Past every version of 180 and remix and this, that, and the other, and I kept playing it and going.
Was there a U.S. pressing?
It was a U.S. pressing. It just happened
US
to be
presses
a
were very
really good U.S. pressing. And and it's all marketing, because a thicker record doesn't mean the needle gets more information. It just means the record may not warp as much as somebody else does. But what kind of gets me is that when they charge unbelievable amounts of money for pressings that are supposed to be special, and it turns out to be they're no more special than what you have, that's the crime. That's somewhere where people can feel like they're ripped off, that they're taking advantage of this. Because I'm a record collector as well.
I'm too.
And I write for a record collector magazine. And record collectors are not necessarily audiophiles. Record collectors buy things for other reasons.
But recently I've seen them that they like to say, I've listened to it on a torrent stack and I've cleaned it on a KL audio machine.
So you don't get the guys I get, which is I like the fact that the print is a quarter-inch lower and it's yellow paint and it's not green, because that's a whole other level of crazy. Okay, that's why I'm saying there's record collectors and there's audio record collectors. There's two very different groups. When I write for Goldmine, I have to kind of keep in mind.
You write for Goldmine?
Yeah, I have a Beatle column for Goldmine. So I write a Beatle column called Now We're 64, and I write stories about the Beatles. In fact, Tuesday, you know where I'm going Tuesday? I'm interviewing Charles Martin about the Revolver mix.
Whoa.
I'm flying back to New York Monday night, and Tuesday I'm going to listen to the new remixed Revolver, and I get to interview Giles for the second time. I interviewed Giles about Sgt. Pepper. You know what's interesting that he said to me about Sgt. Pepper? He said even though Sgt. Pepper was remixed in the digital domain, they're not secretive, they had to put it in digital in order to remix the record, he said he'd prefer to listen back on vinyl than on CD. He said to me this, he goes, "Damn it, I don't know why. It just sounds better on vinyl."
I've got a fear about that. I mean, I'm very much, this latest controversy, as I said, I feel that we have two camps flying, like the analog and the digital camp, and they're flying little Cessna planes. Above there is that feeling of creating a feeling to people to listen to. And I remember that Robert Ludwig was saying years ago that he can make a digital tape that will, of his analog thing, that will fool people that they wouldn't even know. And so I think that we have to elevate the subject. I think that the sound of vinyl, the sound of CD, the sound of tape records, and the sound of streaming is all attached to, as well, to a lot of mechanical parts. And I think that we can hear like we can hear a glass CD versus a normal CD, and a glass CD sounds a ton better. Even anybody you pull out from the street and you put the same record on glass, and and the same with vinyl. I think that Dynaflex, and you just said it, so many prints of your pressings of your Pepper, they sound different. So we hearing as well quite a lot the mechanical aspect of the component, and I think the same applies to tape recorders. I mean, people love the sound of tape recorders, and some people would say, and they're right, that from the purist point of view, this is the best source. This is why we now introduce that as an extra source at this show, which didn't happen, unfortunately, because of the death of the Queen. But I think we as well listening somewhere to the sound of the tape. Inside the whole thing, we listen to the tape. Just like you probably and I can hear the sound of a Magnapan tweeter. Not to say that it's a bad tweeter, but that you can hear it. And the same as you can hear the sound of a dome tweeter because of the material. So I think that every component, unfortunately, in the hi-fi chain has got a sound. We have faced with listening to the sound of the material. So the controversy, this digital analog controversy, is maybe a good time to reunite and to say, listen, as long as you get pleasure out of it, uh, who cares?
I stream.
Exactly.
I stream.
I
You know
stream
why?
it.
Because it's easy to stream. Because it gives me access to billions of things I don't have.
Absolutely.
I'm not going to go out and buy every record I need. But if
Absolutely.
all of a sudden somebody says to me, "You should check out this new act," all I do is hit. I have Tidal and I have Qobuz. Then you can argue between the two because there's always going to be controversies with absolutely everything in this business. But one thing we discussed when I first sat down with you was this: that the closest any human being will ever get to the artist's music that they love is the mixing console at the time the producer's actually listening. And the fact is that all of the stuff that we're talking about are generations past that. So it's a matter of how many generations are past it, how many generations you are close enough to it. And if you're in the business like we are, the generations are getting closer. We're getting closer and closer to the mixing console. But does that matter if the song sucks? It doesn't matter. If the song sucks and the band sucks, you don't want to play it. I don't care how good it is, it's going to suck. So you have to really love the music that you're buying first.
Oh, I think that's a wonderful way to get to the end of this conversation. Would you agree, JJ, that we deserve in the high-end audio industry to be part of just like the watch guys, the specialist watch guys are, and the specialist car guys, elevated to that rather than being a, shall we say, a next Tottenham Court Road type of device? X, because that Tottenham Court Road, you wouldn't even recognize it anymore.
No, but I would say this. I'd say that traversing from the cheapest to the most expensive in all of these cases, watches, stereos, cars, the fact is that the technology at the highest end filters down over time.
Absolutely.
And what you can get today for the dollar you spend is so much better as you grow, as you become more sophisticated. Like the watch industry, like many other industries, like the car industry, you have millions of levels to go. And the beauty of it is that the high-end industry's levels are at levels that one can't even imagine unless one's exposed to it, which is why going to a hi-fi show is so important. Because you expose these people to something they've never had. And then what happens is they become aspirational. And they go, wow, that is the world in front of me that I never knew existed. And that's where someone like you comes in.
In the world of pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The world of pleasure. Well, thank you, JJ, for a wonderful chat again.
Thank you very much. And by the way, can I just say that we are a couple of miles from Cookham, which is where the Jimmy Page Studios, where our album You Can't Stop Rock and Roll was recorded. And we're only a couple of miles from Battle, which is where Under the Blade was recorded. And this year is the 40th anniversary of Under the Blade. And we're going to be releasing that on vinyl, double vinyl, at the end of the summer. So I'm giving a plug for my 40th anniversary. And next year is the 50th anniversary of Twisted. I don't know what that means. All I can tell you is for me to say 50 years, I need to take ibuprofen just to say that. Thank you very much.